Hi everyone, and I just wanted to make a quick video. I feel like it might be good to sort of put out more information around this, the importance of this worldview thing, um, in understanding the domain, the topic, the interaction of science and religion or spirituality. So I think that part of the premise of the course is that we can't actually address this issue, and I'm going to tell you why, but we can't actually address this issue with any effectiveness um, that isn't deluding ourselves unless we understand this aspect of worldview, basically. And so that, and in particular, it's our worldview, our culture's worldview, our parents' worldview, everything that's really impacted what might be contained in our worldview. First of all, I'd like to say about worldview, and somewhere I have a picture that I might send you. Essentially, the aspect of worldview that we're conscious of is probably could be characterized as like the tip of an iceberg, basically. So, and then underneath the water, of course, the majority of the iceberg is underneath the water, and the majority of our worldview might well be operating unconsciously in us. I'm not saying that it is, but I think that's kind of the model. Basically, we grew up in this culture, in our culture, and we were exposed to our education system, to the views of our parents, to the very society around us. It's ultimately represents a kind of programming of how we see the world, how we see ourselves, the relationship between ourselves and the world, what we think is real and true, what we think is ultimate reality. All of these things um, are something that we kind of inherit in a way. Now I want to say that of course I know that many of us and you in particular have um, worked on our worldview over our lives, and that we've had probably spiritual experiences. We've done spiritual work. We've been in a way kind of expanding or shifting our worldview over time, and so consciously we're aware of having a different perspective, perhaps, than the majority might say. That our worldview has evolved essentially in our lives. But what I want to say is that certainly is true for the conscious part of our worldview. But in the unconscious component, the bottom part of the iceberg, I'm willing to bet that much of the old worldview, the worldview of our culture and society, is still operating. And I know that this is true in me. So, and but since it's unconscious, how much do we really know that's true, that's the case? Um, and so this, I guess, is a hypothesis, a theory, if you like, that this is true. Although I think there's a lot of good evidence to back it up. Um, so the point is that with the unconscious operation of the old worldview of our culture has worldviews are never really simple things, so they're quite complex, but it is extremely influenced by what we call modernism, and in particular by science, essentially, because all of our institutions run, at least theoretically, according to, if not the principles of scientific discoveries, the principle of that approach. If you see them in the experiment, testing, result kind of hypothesis system. So we operate that system everywhere, basically in our education systems, health systems, and all other basically major systems. So our culture, the dominant view in our culture irrespective of whether you're a religious person or not, say a Christian in the United States, for example, um, the dominant worldview gives authority in this physical world to this viewpoint, this which is tied to science, or is said to be tied to science, we think is tied to science. Okay, I will argue, perhaps throughout this course, is that actually the worldview that is tied to science isn't scientific in itself, and that's a problem. But nevertheless, we think that it is. So science has greatly influenced our worldview. So the pair of glasses that we look through, even if we've become spiritual and modified, is still influenced, I'm suggesting, by this inherited worldview, the existent worldview, mainstream, and that even when we look at the topic of spirituality or the topic of religion, we will be looking still through that pair of glasses. So it will not be a sort of an independent or, in scientific terms, objective view. By the way, we're going to talk about that word objective, and the possibility of objectivity for us as humans. But in terms of actually being able to look at something head on without inherent assumptions and biases that are present in the existing worldview, then, and this problem is going to be seen throughout science. Anyway, but just for ourselves, we turn those, even on this newly developed, growing part of our worldview that is perhaps spiritually based, even that, we will tend to look at it through those glasses, if you see what I mean, and sort of judge it accordingly. We will tend to want to go to science for backup on this expanding worldview, or which is presumably something that has developed and grown by our direct experiences we've had. So we'll tend to look at those and sort of fit them into a construct, a model of reality and we'll do that in a way that is very influenced by this old worldview. See what I mean? And we won't know we're doing it. We do. And so the point is that we need to become somewhat aware of this process in order to even go into the topic of science and spirituality, because right from the very word go, the first footstep we take forward into this subject, we're already kind of on the wrong foot, because we're already in the worldview that we have, if you see what I mean, inherited from our culture. We're already in that worldview, so we can't actually sort of look at it. We're still, even though we're thinking, oh, I'm a spiritual person, or I've got, even we're actually unbeknownst to us, potentially at least, still caught in this web of our culture's worldview, basically. And so we have to try and become aware of that. And a lot of this first part of the course is an attempt to bring that idea at least to consciousness for us, so that we then can think to ourselves, okay, how might I sort of step outside of this worldview and look at this from a very different point of view? A lot of this has to do with the way we use our thought processes, our thinking processes, and approaching things from a thinking process, right? So the very idea of rationality and reason and this kind of thing is a part of this kind of construct that we have in our modern culture. So what we say about the world might and would have to, for us to accept it, seem reasonable, seem rational, right? And that is a problem, because we need to be able to step outside of that box, ultimately, to look at this topic and really to see it for what it is, without already being colored by influences on our thought content and process, mode of perception, mode of grasping, mode of understanding. This is very much part of the way we've been trained and brought up in our culture. But if we can at least sort of start to become aware of that, step outside of it, then we can sort of grasp something which I think I can only describe as the more you sort of try to do that, more it creates a kind of gap, a kind of space. It's like nothing. If I sort of understand that I'm looking at the world and even myself through a particular kind of lens, and I say, you know, what would it, that's a lens I'm looking through, you start to feel this kind of, you start to get lighter and more spacious, and it's like nothing necessarily has to rush in to fill that space, because ultimately that's where we want to be. We want to be in a kind of spaciousness with no sort of hard defined opinions about things. Hard defined opinions are a clue, I would say, to an operating worldview. Strong opinions, right? So we look at it and we're like, we kind of find ourselves in an open space. And that's the space we want to be in. We want to be sort of in this open space. I don't know if we ever want to leap into a perspective ultimately, and that's a weird thing to say. But if we can sort of stay kind of neutral, arrive at this true neutrality, then we can begin to see this issue truly, I think. Prior to that, we can't. So I won't even really engage in a discussion on science and spirituality with anyone who hasn't gone through this kind of process, because it's pointless. It's like everything they say, even if it's kind of radically different from our culture's worldview, it's still tainted with the mechanisms of modernity, with the mechanisms of the Enlightenment and scientific revolution modes of thought that have really become very integrated, very ingrained into our culture, at least I believe, and we can back that up. But so all of this, in a way, this focus of the focus on history in this course, history is incredibly important, is designed to bring us to a kind of awareness of where what we think and how we think has come from. How has it evolved? How did we get to this place? And that enables us to become more aware of its operation inside of us, more able to step outside of this influence, to some degree at least. I don't think stepping outside of it totally is possible, but to some degree, yes. And stepping out, and this ability to, at least in our imaginations, step outside to some degree, imagine we're outside of that perspective, is very important, and we're going to experience that more. So these sort of a little bit certainly challenging and difficult practical experiential exercises I have in the course are again are really designed to sort of play with this idea of worldview that might exist within us. And you find that when a particular worldview is examined, it tends to become transparent. It tends to sort of fall apart in a way. Our society's worldview cannot actually survive under the microscope, under a true analysis. It just falls apart. And so that makes it clear that we each need to come up with our own worldviews, independent of this influence, being aware of this influence inside of us. We need to try and come to our worldviews in that process. And that's the way we can sort of step outside of this box, I think, that we're all in. And then we can truly talk about science and spirituality and the beautiful thing that is science, the beautiful thing that is spirituality. But what's the relationship between them? Because I think from that perspective, we will see they're completely inseparable, ultimately. So anyway, these are just sort of thoughts I'm throwing at you, and we've got a long way to go. And take what you like and leave the rest. Disagree with me. Tell me that you disagree with me. Let's discuss, debate, dialogue. We're going to be meeting on Sunday to talk as well, to discuss more. So all of these things are up for grabs. Okay, guys. Hope you're having a good week. Bye.